Hi people. Just a quick aside before I get into this main video. The news today that Betty Boothroyd has died. She made her place in parliamentary history, of course, as the first female speaker of the House of Commons. She was from the Labour Party, but she won acclaim, I think, on both sides. I think she was seen as one of our stronger speakers. Um, she certainly didn't, she was no pushover. She was very assertive, and she was a bit before my time, before my interest in politics, 1992 to 2000. But she certainly left a mark. A couple of days after the death of Sir Bernard Ingham, Margaret Thatcher's private secretary. So that's two prominent political figures have passed away in recent days. I want to talk about a situation I've sort of been following in West Yorkshire in the background. I haven't followed this closely, but it's I think it's important to comment on this because it's not an isolated sort of situation, and I think it's very concerning. Involved in an alleged desecration of a Quran in a school in West Yorkshire. Now I've got two articles open, and hopefully this won't interfere with the screen. Because I've had a little bit of a problem recently with the screen jumping a bit. But basically, the BBC report states that four students have been suspended from the Kettlethorpe High School in Wakefield. Um, this was brought in by a Year 10 pupil. Apparently, the pupil is autistic. This is significant. And apparently, it sustained a bit of scruff and minor damage, very minor damage. Certainly, no pages were ripped out or anything like that. Um, So, this groups that want to sort of make this into something it's not, such as Five Pillars, which have a long track record of stoking up tensions, they're going to try and suggest it's some sort of hate crime against Muslims. I think what happened here is some people's done something a little bit reckless and taken out of context, or taken out of. Is it worthy of a suspension? I'm not sure. This is what the report says. Head teacher Tudor Griffith said the book remained intact and there was no malicious intent from those involved. He held a meeting with concerned community leaders on Friday. Independent councillor for Wakefield East, Akif Akbar, called the meeting after being contacted by people calling for more information. He said reports that the Quran had been burnt or destroyed were untrue, and he had inspected the book himself during the meeting. Mr. Akbar said that it had been told the book had been taken to school as a dare by a pupil who lost while playing a Call of Duty video game with other students. In other words, it was a childish prank by some students. That was about it. There was no malicious intent. This wasn't some sort of far right hate crime. Um, but let's say, for the sake of argument, the book had been destroyed. Not good. It's a holy text, but Islam is hypersensitive, and only in Islam would you see this sort of situation where death threats are being made, as they allegedly have been against a student. And concerningly, his mother has actually taken to go into the local mosque to explain that her son meant no harm and that he's autistic. We now have a situation where a mother of a 14-year-old boy who's autistic and being threatened by Islamist thugs. She didn't press charges because she feared it would escalate. The West Yorkshire Police can't act if they don't have formal charges, if they don't have formal complaints. That's really concerning. That suggests to me that Islamists are holding sway in this part of the country. And it's probably not the only part. But I do think West Yorkshire has a specific problem because it's the same county where only a couple of years ago a teacher was forced into hiding over a lesson in which she was talking about blasphemy. This is disgraceful. And I think groups like Five Pillars really need to be closely scrutinised. Now, I've read another piece on this from The Spectator, and this is by Steerpike. That's a pen name, obviously. I'm not sure who the journalist what his real name is, but I'm just going to quote this because I think it's important. Another troubling story out of West Yorkshire. Four pupils are reported to have been suspended from Wakefield's Kettlethorpe High School after a copy of the Quran was scuffed by students on Wednesday. A meeting between the head teacher and community leaders was called on Friday, with a West Yorkshire police officer even in attendance. The four subsequently confirmed to the BBC they were liaising with the school about the minor damage to the text. The 14-year-old boy in question It's claimed to be highly autistic, another concerning detail. I do strongly believe if this had been a Bible or even a Torah, I don't think we would be seeing the same level of police involvement and so on. Absolutely not. So in light of all of this, Mr. S was surprised, I think that's it's writing in first person there, was surprised to see a Labour councillor, this is an elected official, charging headfirst into the tinderbox. Usman Ali, and by the way, not to be confused, in Sunderland, a local councillor here is Usman Ali, but he's a Conservative, nothing to do with this, so just for the record. This is a councillor in West Yorkshire. Usman Ali released a statement on Friday night in which he claimed that the Quran had been desecrated. He had no evidence of that, and that all the authorities, namely the police, the school, and the local authority, should be taking swift and appropriate action to deal with this grave situation. He should have just called in the UN while he was at it. We all need to work together to make sure that this terrible provocation does not set back community relations for years to come, he concluded. A Labour councillor suggesting a pupil be criminalised. Are the blasphemy laws now back? That wasn't one of Sir Keir's 5 missions. Mr. S asked Labour for whether Ali would be condemned for his comments and if the party whip would be withdrawn. The party declined to provide a response to multiple requests, though the tweet of its statement was deleted after the Spectator got in touch last night. Funny that. Well, the fact it's been deleted shows that there has been some backlash. That's good. But this is concerning that an elected official, now he's a councillor, he's not an MP, but still an elected official, is actually trying to stoke up the flames against a teenager. And let's be clear, this was not a far right group, burning Qurans deliberately, which I don't agree with. But this was simply a kid who was involved in a childish prank, perhaps particularly taking into account he's autistic, perhaps out of absolutely no malicious intent whatsoever. And apparently there was no serious damage, slight scruffing, and that was it. But I think for this councillor to, okay, he's deleted the tweet, but he now needs to put out a disclaimer saying that he accepts that there was no major malicious intent. And, if something happens, God forbid, if something happens and this young lad is attacked or his family is attacked or one of the other students is attacked by Islamist thugs, then this councillor will have a lot of answering to do. But I think West Yorkshire has a problem with this. Let's not forget this is also the county where the 7-7 bombers came from, Leeds to be precise. So it's concerning. Um, and potentially a tinderbox. The fact that he is demanding that the police and the council and all these resources get involved over what ultimately amounts to material damage on a book. That is it. Um, I just think that what we're seeing here is again symbolic of the extreme hypersensitivity of Islam. Now, in Pakistan, people are lynched to death barbarically. The latest victim was only a few weeks ago, and it happens at least several times every year. More often than not, they are vulnerable people. I've heard of cases of mentally vulnerable people in Pakistan being accused of blasphemy. In the latest incident, the victim was dragged from the police station and I assume hanged or beaten to death. The details weren't clear, but he was killed. Um, it's absolutely that that mindset that prevails in parts of Pakistan can never be allowed to take hold here. And I'm concerned that there is Islamist minds in our midst. And whenever the government tries to do something about this, you get the usual crowd, 5 pillars, and their leftist allies saying it's Islamophobic, it's dog whistle politics. We need to be absolutely clear that whilst we are a pluralistic society, Muslims have freedom to practice their faith. There is no freedom to demand special treatment or to issue threats. None. And I think Keir Starmer needs to show some backbone and suspend this councillor. The fact it's deleted isn't enough. Because, in the time, I don't know how long it stayed up for. Who knows how many people read that? How many of his followers? Or at the very least, if he's not suspended, he should be mandated to make a disclaimer, condemn the threats against his students, and, tone down the temperature, basically. But I do think senior politicians need to speak out in this. It's not an isolated incident. It's happened before. And I'm concerned it's only a matter of time before someone's killed, because someone will be accused of some sort of desecration or blasphemy, and some hothead Islamist will kill them. It's happened in France. Um, I think it's a very real possibility, and that's scary. But this mindset must never ever be allowed to take hold. And Muslims have to accept that there will never be blasphemy laws in this country. There is no criminal offence of offending Islam, nor should there be. By the way, whilst we're on the subject, that's why I really hope Mr. Yusuf doesn't become the new leader of the SNP, because I think his views on issues like this are concerning. I think his involvement in the drafting of Scotland's so-called religious hate bill, I forget the precise name, but that definitely looked like a pathway to blasphemy laws. Ironically, they were supposed to replace archaic blasphemy laws, but no religion should be above criticism. And I think it has to be said that Islam is more hypersensitive than any. I'm not saying you won't get sensitive people in the other faiths, but you do not get this level of hypersensitivity. I mean, I am absolutely sure that if a Bible was damaged in an Anglican school, there would not be the same outrage. There just wouldn't. So, when Muslims say that their faith is unfairly maligned, they have to look at this. They have to look at how the wider public sees that hypersensitivity. I get that it's a holy book, but it is ultimately a book, print and paper, absolutely not justified in threatening someone's life, especially when there is no malicious intent involved. Or to give another example, when that far right group threatened to burn a Quran, I don't know if we went ahead with it in Stockholm recently. So Turkey's president decides to vilify the entire Swedish nation, even though that group had nothing to do with the Swedish government. I think free societies need to stop caving in to Islamists. And I'm concerned that the rot has already set in some parts of this country. There needs to be pushback. And it takes, Starmer needs to show a backbone and speak out on this, because it's almost always Labour councils